Joel with TRU Precious Metals. Please give us some background information and an overview of your company.
Sure. Thanks, Jessica. And I will just apologize in advance in case I have any tech issues like I was having earlier, but I'm going to roll on in the meanwhile. I'm Joel Freudman, co-founder and CEO of TRU Precious Metals Corp. We are exclusively Newfoundland focused as well. We've included our title on our disclaimer slide, but I'll get into, I guess, some of the more exciting things. We first moved into Newfoundland back in about August, September of last year with our first property pickup. Since then, we did a 5-property acquisition spree over the subsequent 5 months, between last September through to this January, with the last deal actually closing in May to pick up our flagship asset. I'll get into the overview here of the highlights about TRU Precious Metals. We have over 34,000 hectares spread across 5 properties. The focus, though, really is our flagship Golden Rose project, which is a project we optioned from TSX-listed Altius Minerals. It sits right beside 2 of probably the largest gold deposits in Newfoundland, and certainly the largest undeveloped resource in all of Atlantic Canada, which is the Marathon Gold Deposit. Well, we're their next door neighbors, so we feel we're pretty well situated with that asset. In terms of our shareholder base, we have Eric Sprott, Canadian billionaire precious metals investor. He's our largest shareholder. He came in on a financing in June. Altius is actually our second largest shareholder now. They had optioned us this Golden Rose project in an all-share deal. So, they're betting on our management team as well as our ability to develop the asset to make their equity investment worth something. And we also have institutions in our shareholder base as well as management ownership. Spread across our team, which I'll dive into a little bit. We have mining, capital markets, and legal expertise. My background, maybe a bit unconventional for a junior explorer co. I'm actually a securities and mergers lawyer by training, so fairly transactional lawyer, which kind of influences how we've worked through the property transactions to get to this stage. And then we have a pretty solid cash position for a company our size. We did a $3.5 million heavily oversubscribed financing back in March. We did the $3.5 million flow-through raise in June. That money's already being put into the ground, primarily at Golden Rose and at a secondary project of ours, Twilite, where we've completed a drill program. And we still, though, have somewhere above $6 million in cash in the bank. So we're pretty well situated to execute on our existing exploration plans, as well as to maintain the treasury after corporate overhead and everything is taken into account. In terms of the team, I've given you a little bit about my background. For an exploration company, you obviously want to be very interested in who are the people really on the ground and figuring out what we may have. Our Vice President of Property Development, Barry Green, he's based in Grand Falls, Windsor, Newfoundland. He's got over 30 years of experience internationally as well as in Newfoundland and across Canada. He's worked in geological consulting. He was an executive at a publicly traded mineral exploration company for about 16 years, which is a fairly difficult skill set to find in terms of the geological and capital markets experience. So he's helped us land a couple of these property transactions. And supporting him is our exploration manager, Pierce Bradley. We hired him away. He's also got over 3 decades of experience, Newfoundland and elsewhere in Canada. And we hired him away from Maritime Resources, who's putting their deposit further north of Newfoundland into production. So we have someone with mine development expertise on the exploration team as well. And below them, we also have a field crew, a number of geos on the team, people to work with software. So we have a pretty solid presence on the ground in Newfoundland, obviously given that's where our properties are. And we're also supported by our CFO, who's got over 3 decades of experience, and our corporate secretary, who also has over 3 decades of experience. So a pretty sound management team, as well as other personnel for things like communications, capital markets, administration. But what's really exciting, I guess, about TRU, of course, it ultimately comes down to the properties, the quality of assets you have. Our Golden Rose project here is the nice yellow star. Like I mentioned, it's between the Marathon Gold project, which is over 4 million ounce deposit, as well as the Cape Ray deposit, which is in the bottom left here. That's about 840,000 ounces. So, I figure, particularly as someone not with a technical or geological background, where would you want to look for gold? Probably beside the biggest gold deposits you can find. And so that's where our flagship asset is located, and that's why we're quite excited about it. We've been running a field level program now for about 2 to 3 months, trying to cover as much of the property as we can, and we're setting up to do a drill program in October. So that's obviously an exploration catalyst for the company. We've already secured a driller. We've already submitted permit applications. We've already identified targets. Our goals are really going to be, I'd say, threefold. Number one, infill drilling at the existing zone on the property, the Southwoods Lake Zone, where there's already been gold hits. I guess we don't have an image of it, but number one is kind of further the existing drilling that's previously been done towards to start to get a handle, I guess, on whether or not there's a deposit there and kind of advance it towards a resource, because we do know there's gold there. Number two, we picked up a property that had visible gold all along it, and so that's certainly going to be an exploratory drill target. These are all, of course, publicly announced. So you can take a look through our past press releases. And the third one is to kind of do some regional exploration to develop a pipeline of targets. There's already 5 or 6 other gold showing spread across the property that we haven't even had time to really get to yet. And so our kind of overall objective here is let's advance the property as best we can to be kind of a turnkey asset where you could have a seasoned mine development or management team come into the company, or in a corporate M&A scenario where someone larger could say, this is a fairly well-developed asset. The existing team has taken it, run with it, moved it up the field, and now it's kind of turnkey for a seasoned operator to advance and develop the property, really. We also, though, do have another property where we've actually just completed drilling back at the end of June, let's say. We did a 12-hole program at our Twilite Gold project, and I will just flip back for a moment. It's further up the structure here. If you look between it's to the southwest of Sokoman, northeast of Cantera, so we're along the same trend, which is a deposit-bearing structural corridor in Newfoundland. So again, we're on the right street in the neighborhood, and we've actually just released our first 2 holes from this program yesterday morning. We did hit gold in both holes, 10 to 11 meters, about 1 gram per ton. So not extremely high grade. I think probably more indicative of some of the grades that you'll find along that shear zone. But it's also great to actually hit good continuity of intervals across that drill program. And in terms of further exploration catalysts, we still have 10 holes out of that 12-hole, 2,600 meter program still to come as the lab kind of works through the assays. So we should have basically rolling drill results and drill programs over the rest of the calendar year. I understand that's what's got mining investors excited. So we should have no shortage of drilling and drill results. I think I'll wrap it up there, but want to thank everybody for their time so far.
That was great, Joel. Thank you so much. First question is, what are some realistic metrics for investors to look for in terms of gold grades?
I would say, we would consider probably low grade would be less than 1.5 grams per ton. Medium grade, probably 1.5 to 5 grams per ton, give or take. Above 5 grams would be high grade. But as Tim spoke to, it also does kind of depend on how difficult or not it is to access and mine it. I guess I would say in terms of what I see from companies that are more advanced than us, if you look at, for example, Marathon Gold, who's probably one of the closest to the mine, has a huge deposit. I think their average grade somewhere around 1.75 to 2 grams per ton, and that seems to, and also so is Cape Ray Matador Mining. So kind of that range is certainly economic for Marathon to mine. It's made a resource for Matador, probably along the Cape Ray Valentine Lake shear zone, which is where our properties are, which is where Tim's property is further up, although he's also getting high grades. Those numbers are probably fairly indicative. And then in the Appleton Fault, which is where Newfoundland Gold is and Labrador Gold, that's where they seem to be experiencing the significantly higher grades. So there's almost kind of 2 structures through the province that have their own geological features.
What are some of the parallels that you would draw between Newfoundland and other well-known discovery areas?
I'll take my best shot here, which is really more from talking to people who have more experience than me and more technical knowledge. And speaking with a number of particularly institutional equity analysts who cover the gold sector. There was one in particular at one of the independent banks that put out a research report comparing Newfoundland to the Abitibi Gold Belt, which is a prolific region in Northern Ontario and Quebec in terms of geological prospectivity and the hosting, frankly, of many, many significant size deposits. And then there's a lot of comparisons, particularly over on the Appleton Fault on the Newfound Gold side to Fosterville. And I'm just honestly a bit less familiar with the geological specs of that, but I know that's an area in Australia that hosts significant gold mineralization and deposits too. So I think you've got probably 2 analogs in the geological world that I know about, which are both very good starting points in terms of comparables.
How is infrastructure and exploration work and the local workforce set up?
I've been to both of our core assets.
Yep.
By logging road, actually. So Twilite is like a 15-minute drive from Grand Falls, Windsor, where our VP lives, where I set foot on the property by waking up and driving to the property. Golden Rose, we went through a logging road that's actually about 2 hours, connects with a highway that runs through the middle of Golden Rose. So you don't have to go into jungles. You don't have to build infrastructure that wasn't there. You don't have to build all the hydro. It makes the region that much more competitive. And I think an implication that's worth mentioning on this question is just the cost structure for a lot of the explorers and then the eventually development companies is lower than a lot of comparable regions where it's up to the companies to build the infrastructure.
What are some of the milestones ahead, and how would you guide investors to look at the space when assessing as a possible investment?
I think in terms of the maturity of the gold belt would certainly be, there are a number of companies, especially the companies that have been there for the longest time. So it would be like a Sokoman, Newfound, Lab Gold, certainly like a Marathon, Matador. There are companies rolling out massive scale drill programs or well underway. So, that's kind of an ongoing source of news flow for investors from those specific companies, but it will also give you a sense of what the geological prospectivity is for gold on any of the structures that are being drilled. I think another major catalyst would be eventually Marathon putting their Valentine gold deposit, getting the mine operational, which I think is targeted for late 22 or early 23. So, that's still working its way along. And then there are also other kind of mines in other regions in Newfoundland coming on stream as well, like I think Maritime Resources, like there's a couple of them. So I think there's not going to be a shortage of kind of drilling going on across the island. It's almost impossible to book drillers for that reason. So there's a constant stream of news flow out of all the companies in the region, let alone, people exploring their properties through other methods. I think there's a lot of catalysts for everyone to watch. And if it proves out geologically, like any of the comparables that have been referenced on this call, you're talking about, kind of a decades long runway, right? Multiple years and decades, as opposed to what happens, next quarter or next season.
Why Newfoundland, and why now for investors out there?
Given my transactional background, I think another interesting thing that it's still early enough days that people are busy exploring, but what investors in the market and the existing companies haven't seen is mergers and acquisitions, and particularly big company like majors or mid-tiers moving into the province in any meaningful way. Marathon has some exposure to Franco-Nevada. There's like a royalty stream and an investment. But I think eventually you probably will start to see consolidation in this region because there are a lot of companies, including ourselves, that are smaller. So consolidation for scale, as well as the more advanced projects getting picked off by larger companies. So I think you haven't seen that yet. You haven't seen the major institutional equity flows into the province. And those are probably indicia that we're earlier than later in this ballgame.